Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the Last Round Podcast, episode 83. Thank you very much for once again listening. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Republic, or you're watching the broadcast on YouTube, we appreciate it. Mike, it seems like we're a lot of stuff, at least by me, is opening up. Whether it's good or bad, it is what it is. But the good thing for us is that boxing, at least here in the States, starts this week. Right, Mike?
Back at last. Small cards, no fans, but at least it's coming back.
Right. Absolutely. So that's a good thing, especially for our show, because after a while, we're just like, we need to start talking about some fights, previewing, but it seems like we're getting the ball rolling again. But as I mentioned, thank you very much for joining us this week. And this week, we got another special guest. Very important man, very important person in the boxing game. He's the head of the IBO World Sanctioning Body. They have the IBO World titles, of course. I believe the highest, would you say, Mike, the highest profile fighter who holds the IBO title at the moment would be Anthony Joshua?
Yes, out to Anthony Joshua. And obviously Triple G back in the day was a big supporter of the IBO. Absolutely.
So we have the president and head of the IBO on the last round this week, Ed Levine. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Yes, you guys are breaking up a little bit, but I could manage to hear what you're saying.
Don't worry about it. Like, just if you can just try on your computer, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll try getting back to you.
Yeah, we'll be right here.
Computer.
But Mike, going back to the Chris Eubank thing, I think you touched the nail on the head when.
I'll try to get back to you on
Perfect.
Computer.
Thank you. I think how Chris Eubank Sr., if he did hold the belt, I mean, you would know better than I would, Mike, because obviously you're from there. But that I think Chris Eubank Jr. would have a big influence, obviously, from his dad. So it's kind of like homage to his dad. Like, well, my dad held this, so I'm going to hold it too. I mean, do you think so? Right?
Yeah, and then also, during that period where I think Eubank held it, and Ricky Hatton back in the day, it was kind of classed as, I would have said, maybe the fourth. Because I thought the WBO was only really become to relevant since they struck up that partnership with really Matchroom and Top Rank, and kind of sold their titles really to those to Matchroom and Top Rank. Because before that, I'd have said the IBO was the fourth.
Right. No, you're right. So, I mean, because I remember, during that time and especially a couple of years ago, a lot of fans would make fun of Eubank Jr. for saying, "Oh, the IBO this, over that," but it's because, I don't think it's necessarily the IBO's fault that the public opinion in the boxing world is like that. I think, like he mentioned earlier, and how we talked about just before we came on air, Sky Sports was a big move for them to like kind of box them out and say, no, we don't want this many titles, so we're only going to use these. So obviously, when you don't get exposure, especially on the big platforms, I mean, that's the nature of the game. Then it'll decrease your value. I mean, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. If people don't see it on a regular basis, and then when they hear about an IBO title, they're going to be like, what the hell's an IBO title? Kind of similar to the WBU, WBF. You don't hear about those titles. You don't see those titles. So, straight away, you're like, I don't know it. I haven't heard of it. It must be trash.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. And, I thought, even though like we could, hopefully Ed comes back from maybe a computer connection, because there was a lot of questions in there where he was giving us some answers. We just couldn't really hear him because it was cutting out. But like the ones where we touched on the relationships between promoters and sanctioning bodies, Top Rank, WBO, Frank Warren, WBO, WBA and or WBC and maybe PBC fighters. A lot of PBC fighters have WBCs, or I mean Tyson Fury has WBC, but just in general, like I think that's a very interesting question to talk about, especially somebody coming from the head of a sanctioning body. And the president. So, even though it's kind of like a taboo topic to talk about in terms of talking to presidents of sanctioning bodies and all that stuff, it's interesting for fans and media members to hear the explanations behind it. So, I don't know. I hopefully Ed can kind of jump back on right now from a little bit stronger connection, and we can hear his explanation and his answers, or what he thinks about situations like that. Because I also want to touch on with him that, obviously he probably wouldn't be in favor of it, obviously, but, like there's been that constant debate of like Dana White saying, oh, if I come into boxing, I'm not going to use any of the sanctioning bodies. I'm going to just create my own titles, like the UFC titles. I mean, I know we've touched on that answer, or that question and that information in the past, in our past episodes. But I think asking somebody like Ed Levine that question and kind of hearing his thoughts about that situation would be pretty interesting, don't you think?
It'd be interesting to see, because obviously, Dana's not having the best of times, this last couple of weeks, arguing with John Jones, Conor McGregor retiring, Henry Cejudo retiring because he's not getting paid, arguments with Masvidal over pay, because essentially they're the dominant force in MMA, so that, people have nowhere else to go. So
right.
They can kind of, agree to them. Masvidal said today that every time he signs a new contract, they add more fights on. Obviously, his pay goes up, but they tie him down to, 6 fights, 8 fights. So when he wins like 2 or 3 more fights, and, he really could be asking for more money, he's already tied down to a huge amount of fights, so he can't. So.
No, you're right. I think I saw him. He's been tweeting about that or posting on social media about his concerns and all that stuff about that whole situation. But do you think, like, kind of playing devil's advocate here, do you think somebody like Conor McGregor, or somebody with that stature, do you think he has issues with contracts like that, or you think he's like, and I don't think so, but do you think he's like, when he fights again, do you think Dana White's like, oh, okay, we're going to lock you in for 6 more fights, or do you think Conor's just that powerful in his popularity already that he's like, nah, I'm only going to sign for 1 fight?
I would say he's an anomaly. He's probably as big as the UFC in terms of brand and brand awareness. So, if you look at all the pay-per-view, big pay-per-view fights, his name's all over him. And he knows that, he's got statistics to prove that, he brings the money. So he can kind of, negotiate a contract probably more in his favor than anybody else in the UFC.
Right. Oh, I think we got Ed back. There he is.
Let's try this.
Okay, that looks way better, Ed. Hopefully.
And I can hear you.
Okay, great. Hopefully this works out. We were just talking about different things, obviously. Okay. But I believe the last question that we kind of left on, or the ones we kind of want to go back to, just to make sure our listeners kind of hear your perspective, is if you can kind of reiterate your explanation or your thoughts on relationships between sanctioned bodies and promoters, people, obviously fans and hardcore boxing fans see certain relationships attached to certain promoters. Can you kind of speak on that, especially being the head of a sanctioning body in the professional sport of boxing?
Yes, well, I think that that's been the history of boxing is relationships. Even when there was back to the era 40, 50 years ago, if you were, it all was controlled by New York, and the relationships built around some unsavory people that ran boxing in the New York area. And if you didn't sign up with particular promotional groups, you didn't get a fight. Going way back to that era, I think somebody like Sugar Ray Robinson probably had 70 fights, right, something like that, until he before he could get a world title fight because he wouldn't join he didn't make the right connections. He refused to play the game the way they wanted to play it. So, as the years went by, we still have that same situation. Promoters have very close relationships with certain sanctioning bodies, and that's a given. You know them because you watch a lot of boxing, so it's not hard to figure out who's going to be on which network and which promoter, which sanctioning bodies are using that promoter. And of course, you also have certain sanctioning bodies that are more tuned into geographical areas in the world. And they go to certain sanctioning bodies because of the geographical requirements for their fighters. So the IBO is not part of that to a large degree. We deal with a lot of different promoters. It would be difficult for me to say, name one promoter that the IBO depends on. It's just not that way with us. If you've got a fighter that's being kept out of the mix because he does not have a relationship with a particular promoter or management that has a relationship with that particular sanctioning body, well, then the IBO as an independent sanctioning body might be the door that you need to open you to more exposure, more opportunities. And all we ask from you is that you have quality fights. We will not sanction. People don't realize. I hear so often, "Oh, it's the IBO. Fight can't be that good." But if anybody took a closer look, they'd see that even for our fights at the entry-level titles, all sanctioning bodies have to have entry-level titles. To move up from a youth title to a continental title to an international title to an intercontinental title, or a regional title, Asia Pacific or whatever. We're not interested on the meaningless fights at any level. What that means is we get people will be shocked if they spend a day in our office. With sanction requests coming in all day from all over the world, and we have like a fighter's promoter or manager will send us a record. My fighter is 12-0, and we want him to fight for your world title. And you go look at that fighter's record, and you see, he's 12 wins and no losses. He's never beaten a fighter with a winning record. all his fights are against fighters that are, 0-1 debut, 4-12. And then we look at our ratings, which are computerized, and we look up where he is in our ratings, and he's 450 in the world, or 800 in the world. So that promoter will come back to us and say, "Well, we just want a title fight," and we will tell that promoter, "That's fine. We'll give you a title fight." That fighter that goes 14-0 in his next fight fights somebody with a winning record, who's at least, and we'll give him a criteria of a ranking, beat that fighter, come back to us. It's amazing how few come back to us, but the ones that do, they want to move their fighter up in a tiered system, win this division, and then you go to the next level. Win that, then you go to the next level. And this has proven very successful for us. We have our Intercontinental title, which, just for your knowledge, you have to be in the top 100 in our rankings. Sounds like easy. Top 100, because there could be 1,500 fighters in your division. Not only do you have to be in the top 100, that's just eligibility to request sanction. Doesn't mean we're going to sanction. Now we look at the fighter. Let's take the same fighter who's 14-0. And we see that he started fighting easy fights at the beginning, but they've been stepping him up. And midway through his 14-0, in his 10th fight, he fights a fighter who's 10-5, who's been some better fighters. Then he fights a fighter who's 12-2. And then he keeps on fighting better and better fighters. And now he's number 80 in the world. And he's undefeated. And he's got a good promoter. And that promoter has a television broadcast outlet. We tell that fighter, you can fight for our Intercontinental title. If you win it, you become eligible for our world title. Eligible. doesn't mean you're automatically going to be able to fight the champion. It means if you win that fight, you are eligible to fight for the world title, and we will take you out of the ratings and show you on the top of our ratings as our Intercontinental Champion. We have fighters like that have worked their way up. I'm just looking at what we had scheduled that were canceled. We have a fighter, I think he fights out of Germany, but he might be someplace else from Eastern Europe, who is going to be fighting for our vacant super middleweight title. He won our Intercontinental Championship. That's how we got there. By winning our Intercontinental Championship, I believe he then had an eliminator. Now he's fighting for the vacant title against another undefeated title. That both meet that criteria. They're future stars. Now this is our where we have some subjectivity, because we have to pick out fighters in that top 100 who we feel can be go much further. We've done that with a lot of fighters. And we also realize that at some point in time that opens doors in another way. The big four want to get them away from us. Okay, so we're saying, listen, fight for our title. They're going to come knocking at your door. Some of those sanctioning bodies will rate them, some won't rank them, but you'll get opportunities. Now, you may be in a strong enough position that you can fight for both titles, which has happened many times with us. Keep your IBO title. If the other sanctioning body doesn't have a problem with it, which luckily most of the time the other sanctioning bodies are reasonable. They won't recognize us, but we cooperate with them and they'll cooperate with us. But there are times when that fighter has to relinquish our title in order to get the higher profile fight, more money. Some fighters stay with us along the whole way. That's why I asked you earlier, why do you think some fighters stay with the IBO? Why do they keep going with us? If they have a fight with another sanctioning body that's more recognized. Well, the reason they do is it gives them clout. When they're told that they have to fight a mandatory against a fighter that is not going to generate much money, because the other fighter that they have a mandatory with might have a relationship with that particular promoter who has a relationship with that particular sanctioning bodies. And that fighter is big enough by then, and fans want to see him, he can make more money fighting somebody that's not as mandatory. So he can, at that point, say, I don't want to take that fight. I'll stay with the IBO because I can make more money fighting that fighter who is much more prominent, much more the kind of fighter the fans want to see than I will fighting that mandatory against a fighter that no one wants to see, that everybody knows it's a given who's going to win the fight. And unfortunately, a lot of mandatories, we know who's going to win the fight. And a lot of mandatories that could win the fight are left waiting a long time for their mandatory shot. Because the champion doesn't want to take the risk of fighting that particular fighter. So that's the way the sport is structured now. Nothing illegal about this. This is just the way the fans know it, or at least the fans who really watch the sport closely are aware of this as well as you guys are. So the IBO champion gets put in a position where, A, he's got insurance. If he's not, if for some reason he has to fight somebody he doesn't want to fight, he's still the IBO champion. He can use it for negotiating. Listen, I already have all our marquee champions use it for negotiation. There's no doubt in my mind. And some of them, without mentioning names, have said, listen, if I lose XYZ title, ABC title, I'll just stick with you guys. You know, everybody in the world knows I'm a great fighter, and they're going to watch me. So it's insurance policy. Negotiating, insurance, and a third factor, which we're pretty proud of. The most important thing to me growing up in this sport is I want a level playing field for our champion. I want to make sure that champion is If he wins the fight, he wins the fight. I tell every champion, I'm not rooting for you. Maybe in my heart, I have one of them that I'd like to see win, or for this. But I want a level playing field. I want you to go into the ring knowing that the judges and the referee are the best that I could possibly approve, and he's going to score the fight the way he sees it, not for any other reason. So we feel we have the best judges, and if you also spent a day in our office, you see what we do with scorecards when they come back. If a judge, anybody can have a bad night, but if you're continually seeing a judge that we call a homie, or a judge that favors one style and one style only, if a judge, and then we compare judges' scorecards, the three of them. If you see one judge is usually the odd man out, there's something wrong here. He could be the odd man out, occasionally. Three different sides of the ring, you're seeing different punches. So these are the reasons why champions stay with us, some of the reasons. Insurance, a place to build yourself in the eyes of the public. You will be seen. You will be continue to grow. If we've subjectively given you this opportunity at these lower level titles, and you continue to grow with them, you're going to get a shot to fight for a world title. And another thing that I think it's important for me to tell you, we don't want to be part of the Big Five because we have different rules. As you know, the other sanctioning bodies have agreements between them regarding rotation of mandatories, regarding many things. And that's fine. It works for them. But we don't want to be part of that. They may not call a fight between an IBO champion and one of their champions a unification fight. In fact, it is a unification fight, but they don't call it a unification fight because it's not part of the Big Four. And that's fine. It doesn't affect what we do. So we have a niche. I'd like it to continue to grow. I think the niche is to be independent, to do what we think is the best for those fighters. And some of them go on to become marquee champions, and some do not, but they've had their opportunity. So that's a little bit more about the connection question that you started with. Went a little astray with it.
Ed, I believe you're the only sanctioning body that uses computerized ranking system.
Yes.
Could you just explain to us how that system works?
Yes, just as an overview. Initially, our rankings were initially we had a system that was produced in the UK, which is still in business, called Independent World Boxing Rankings. We then switched to BoxRec, not because there was anything wrong with the IWBR, but we switched to BoxRec because BoxRec had more tools, more ability to be online and find fighters. Computer, with just give the name of a fighter, and you've got his ranking. Now, the way the software works, it's based on a point system, essentially. You have to beat fighters better than you to move up. You could have 100 wins and no losses and still be in the bottom quarter of the ratings, because you have to beat quality opponents to move up. If you look at BoxRec as an illustration, each fighter is assigned a certain amount of points. How you do against that fighter, decision, TKO, knockout, the other fighter withdraws from the fight, that'll determine how many points you get of his points. If he was ranked higher than you get more points. If he was ranked lower than you may get no points, or lower, or just a few points. So it's a point system. Our software is a little different. Our computer rankings are powered by BoxRec. We have a contract with BoxRec, which is somewhat similar to theirs, but our rankings are not identical. Ours are a little bit different as far as how the software is set up, but they're very similar.
Now, is there a reason? Sorry, Mike. Let me jump in here. Is there a reason why, especially if you're working with BoxRec, like was that your decision to kind of keep them like in separate softwares, or I mean, wouldn't it be just convenient just to kind of use their software just all across the board for you guys?
That's a very good question, and that originally the first I don't know how many years of our contract they were identical, but they're in a different business than we are. You would never guess where I'm going with this, but you really wouldn't. But when we tell a fighter that he's eligible based upon a certain rating, we have to rely on that rating to be the same, or of course the fighter's not going to have any more fights until he fights for that particular title. Well, a couple of years ago, BoxRec changed their entire, what's the word? Not software.
Algorithm?
Algorithm. That's the word I was looking for. They changed all their algorithms. And they did it quickly.
Right.
So here we are with certain fights we approved when a fighter was in our top. To fight for our world title, you have to be in our top 35 for eligibility. So here we have a fighter that we've sanctioned who was number 22 in the world, and now he's the rank number 52 in the world, or vice versa. We sanctioned a fighter who was, it changed our ratings changed overnight, and we had sanctioned and set up all kinds of fights based upon what they were before they changed their algorithms. So we compared the two, and they were still very, very similar. So I said, well, they're close enough, and I know exactly why they changed it for good reasons. They wanted to penalize fighters more that were fighting losers.
Right.
Just that simple. So they changed their algorithms, rightfully so, to stop fighters from moving up by beating less quality opposition. That doesn't affect us at the highest level. So we've stayed with the old algorithms. If you go up to the high levels of the world title type levels, you'll see that they're very, very close. So there was no need, although we do see as the this year progresses, or this might be actually a good time to do it, to start changing our algorithms back to be more identical to BoxRec. That was the only reason. We can't change ratings overnight. It just it threw our whole business into an uproar. We would have to call promoters, say we have to withdraw the sanctioning of that fight.
Right.
Of course, yesterday you were number 20. Today you're number 100.
That's right.
We'll leave it the way it is for now. And that's where we were.
Ed, the IBO has, stuck to their guns, been very traditional. One champion, one weight division. What's your opinion on, the WBA has 4 or 5 world champions, the WBC has the franchise champions, and will the IBO just stick to that? Will they stick to that forever whilst you're in charge?
There's absolutely no chance in the world that we ever change that. This to me is absolutely the worst thing that could happen to boxing, what's happening now. Actually, it really gets me, I'll diverge for a second. Years ago when we started, and I'd have friends of mine who I've known for years, they're boxing writers and producers and people in the game that became my friends. And when they were for sanctioning bodies, they said, Ed, we know you're going to do you're going to run a quality sanctioning body. However, there's already 4 world champions. We cannot recognize you. We cannot say that there's a 5th world champion. We just can't do it. We're drawing a line. No more. And I understood that. I said, I understand because there's 4 is too many. So 5 is even worse. Now that argument has fallen on my ears. Now you have interim champions, you have silver champions, you have regular champions, you have gold champions, you have what's next? Copper, aluminum, into the I mean, So when you come to me and say we don't recognize the IBO because there's too many world champions, I said, wait a second. Your argument was great 10 years ago. Your argument is so hypocritical today because if you recognize a champion from each of those sanctioning bodies, and there used to be the 17 times 4, 68 world champions in all the divisions, and there would have been 84 with us. Now you might have 84 in one sanctioning body. I mean, championship, I can't keep up with them, and I'm in the business. So, it's not something I haven't said, because some of the other presidents, they're very astute boxing guys, and and some of them I'm very friendly with them. Going out to dinner with them, I have a wonderful time talking about boxing. So it's not like they're my enemies. It's just that's their business and the way they're running it. But don't penalize the IBO for what other sanctioning bodies are doing. That's not right in my mind. And I realize the whole, a lot revolves around money. Why do they? No matter what your product is, if you sell more of the product, you're going to make more money. To a point. If you have too much of a product, the product becomes worth less. Maybe not one word worthless, but worth less. Mm-hmm. If you have, if it continue in this path, maybe it'll be just the one word, worthless, not worth less. Mm-hmm. And maybe at some point, people say, I don't understand who's got what now, because some of the broadcasters are putting these labels on every fight as a championship fight. So if I turn on a television, I say this fight's for XYZ world title, or an eliminator for XYZ world title, that if you win that eliminator, you then get to fight the interim champion. And if you win that fight, but they're all called world championships. So I don't think that that's a good thing for boxing. I think that ultimately in the long run, a lot of people are going to make more money out of it. But in the short run, rather, people are going to make a lot more money out of it. But in the long run, it's going to hurt the sport terribly, drastically. I wouldn't mind somebody putting an IBO world title fight on, saying this is an IBO world title fight. It's not considered as valued as a world title by the other world title. But it is an independent world championship that is run properly, and we can rely on the fact that this fighter, who is said, the IBO says is ranked number 15, that's probably a reasonable ranking. He didn't get there by winning some meaningless title, and he didn't get there because of a relationship, and he didn't get there for any other reason other than that he deserves it. So that's my feelings.
This may be a difficult question to answer, and maybe for me to even ask. But do you think one of the reasons that you kind of classed as the 5th world ranking is because if you have the computerized ranking system, and as you said, people can't just suddenly pop up in the top 5 and the top 10, which we know, as hardcore boxing fans, that does happen. So that does happen. People do suddenly appear in the top ranking. So do you think that's why you don't have that alignment with Top Rank, maybe Matchroom, because you're very transparent and, can't be bought as such?
Well, I think it's definitely an impediment to our getting more recognition, because we don't have the ability to change rankings. They are what they are. But this is another reason why we put a top 35 in, because if you take the other sanctioning bodies and each have their own top 15 or whatever number, that would sort of put us out of business for half of those top 15s and the others. So we feel that if you reach the top 35 legitimately in our rankings, you are a world-class fighter. And you'll wind up fighting another world-class fighter. And if you look good and you win our world title, you will get your recognition. So some people say, why 35? My answer sometimes is, well, why? Go look at some other top 15s and look at some guy who's number 12 in that top 15 and he's number 86 in our rankings. Or he may not even be in our top 100 and he's in the top 15. So I can't move. It ties our hands, and from a business sense, I can't say the only way I have is top 100 to win an Intercontinental, and that'll get you into an eliminator. But I don't have I don't want to know what the word to use. I can't manipulate the ratings. Just that simple.
Do you target certain regions, Ed? Because I've looking at the rankings and just knowing boxing, you seem to be very popular in African regions. Germany always seems to be very popular with the IBO.
Germany, South Africa, and Australia. The figures are so unbelievably. I feel like, particularly with South Africa and Australia, we've done some research on this. I think I have it somewhere over here. Yeah. Those to us are like diamonds in the rough. They don't have the broadcasters that can put them out there and pay them enough and get them the notoriety that they need. And they have so many good fighters that I think when I had something in South Africa, there were something like 30,000. Don't quote me on that exact number. But they have so many fighters that try to make their way in as boxers, because boxing has always been a way for people who can't climb out of their economic situation without becoming boxers. Boxers can take you to unbelievable levels. So we did a study in Australia about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We've had 19 world champions from Australia. 19 world champions. And I'll mention some of the names for you that used the IBO to climb into just the way I was talking about. Started with us, Vic Darchinian, trail boxing. Billy Dibb.
Oh, yeah, Billy.
Not a big name, but, he started with us. Danny Green, who's one of the key
legend.
A legend there. And now we're working with a couple of other fighters. Zach Gunn I think he's undefeated, but maybe has one loss. But he is going to fighting for one of our world titles. He was our champion, never lost the title. Tried to climb in with some of the other sanctioning bodies, didn't make it to a world title shot. And now he's fighting for a world title again after holding it some years ago. But we had 19 world champions. And just to name a few others that you probably have heard of. Lenny Zapovigna, I don't know if you ever heard of him. But he's fought a lot in the United States. Lovemore and Do. I don't know if you've heard of him. Also Australian. The other sanctioning bodies, I'd rather not mention them by name.
Right.
Okay. But of the other 4, so we have 19. Of the other 4, one sanctioning body's had 1 world champion. One of the other sanctioning bodies have had 6. One of the other sanctioning bodies has had 7. And one of the other sanctioning bodies has had 11. So you have 1, 6, 7, 11, and 19 from the IBO. And some of them have gone on to, fight for other. A lot of them are duplicates. I mean, Daniel Giel held our title. He's also held the title for some of Billy Dibb. He's held world titles. Lovemore and Do has held other titles. Vic Darchinian kept on going up in weight. He started with us, I think, at flyweight, and then kept on going to higher weights. So South Africa is another country. It is I think it's just coincidentally that's where diamonds are found. real diamonds. But in boxing, they are really diamonds in the rough. And if they're given the proper training and the proper exposure, they have unlimited talent in South Africa. And we, at the lower weights, we've had some great champions at the lower weights who've gone on to really become stars, not only with the IBO, but with other sanctioning bodies as well. I could keep reading your names, but it's not important. But we have probably at any given time 3 or 4 champions from South Africa or Australia at a time, because they've proven to be really, really quality fighters, and they do have an outlet they do have a broadcaster in South Africa that broadcasts their fights, but they can't make the bigger money until they win that title, be seen on those broadcasts, and then move to bigger and better things outside of South Africa, which is what happens.
Did that happen just organically, Ed, or is that just an area that you targeted?
It's an area we targeted.
Right.
Yeah, because it was overlooked. For many years, it was overlooked because of the race problems.
Right.
And then it was overlooked because it's so far away.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing fighters in from South Africa and then training them. Yeah. Because it's not about just being a boxer. Boxer has to train. And who's going to bring in fighters from South Africa when they can bring them from Europe, now Eastern Europe? Mm-hmm. That's easier than bringing them from South Africa. Right. We did target South Africa, and we're lucky enough to have a working relationship with 2 promoters in South Africa. One is the biggest promoter in South Africa, and he knows the way we work. So he doesn't send. He won't. He knows not to ask about a fighter who's not qualified.
And Ed, you seem to be one of the trendsetters in the women's boxing. Obviously, you got Terry Harper as an IBO champion and Cecilia Breakus.
Yes.
Is that something you targeted as well? Tried to be one of the first sanctioning bodies into that?
Absolutely. I felt that there was a real product there that 10 years ago, if you watched 2 female fighters, you'd walk out of the arena. They couldn't fight. They weren't getting the proper training. And nobody wanted to watch them because they were so poor. But that's changed as boxing has become more popular in the last 5, 6, 7 years. The girls want to fight, and there's a market for them. And the ones that are really becoming, Cecilia Breakus is, a treat. She's a fighter. She knows how to fight. She knows how to train. Terry Harper's another, and there's a half a dozen or more that are quality fighters. So yes, we have 3 or 4 quality champions, and we're working with them. It's part of the future.
Now, Ed, kind of going back to the relationships in boxing with question and the topic we touched on, just because we had a lot of listeners when we kind of told some listeners that you were going to be on, they were really interested, especially because you are the head of a sanctioning body. In terms of, you mentioned relationships between promoters and sanctioning bodies. Have you yourself, ever since being the president of the IBO, without, naming names, of course, have you ever been approached by a boxing figure or any promoter, whether big or small, or anybody in boxing saying, hey, we'll help elevate you guys back into the fold if you guys do this, or if you change your rankings to that? Have you ever been approached like that, or anybody on your team?
No, but I can go back years ago where I was when I was a judge. On occasion, someone said they want to send me a present. The president might have been alive, female. I said no. Or when I was a judge, someone handing me a camera. I said, I can't accept that gift. Mm-hmm. But since no one has come to me while I've been the head of a sanctioning body with anything that was awry or under the table, none at all, zero.
Go ahead, Mike.
Ed, I know some of these sanctioning bodies during the coronavirus pandemic that's going on are not going to let their world titles be fought until it's all done and dusted, because obviously everything's changed. You know, the judgings are going to maybe be sat in different areas, just trying to limit the people there. What are the IBO doing? Are they going to let their titles be fought for, or are they going to wait till later in the year?
We're having a meeting over the next week to 10 days with our championships committee. We're going to sit down and talk about an exact something that we can print and get out to the public. Because what we've been telling people since March is everything is on hold, everything's suspended. We're not sanctioning fights. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the 10 fights that we had sanctioned, we told them all they're all postponed. We haven't given anybody a deadline yet. We've been telling them all when things within your area, when your boxing commission and your health authorities tell boxing, your federations or your commission that you can do it, that's time that we can sanction, because these fights need time to train. So we intend to put out some kind of public release that will give a time frame that we're anticipating to. First of all, we've told them all that your 9 months are no longer 9 months to defend. But we have to put a number on that. We've been waiting to get a little clearer picture before changing the 9 months to defend to 12 months or 14 months or 15 months. We also have computer problems to solve. I'll get back to the original question, Danny. But the computer has built into the algorithm that if you haven't fought a fighter within a certain number of points that you have within a period of 18 months, you start going down in the rankings. So you can't just sit on your ranking without meeting quality opposition. That's built into our algorithm and BoxRec's algorithms. So if you get into a ranking of, say, number 20 in the world, and then you're fighting nothing but opponents that you know have no chance of winning, and they have much lower points than you, you go down in the rankings. You want to maintain your ranking. So we have to work on the rankings, how we're going to deal with fighters not going down in the rankings, how much time to give champions to get ready and defend. And also we have a couple of eliminators, same situation. So we're going to work on that in the next week or two. Let me add something. It's along the same lines in answering your question. We don't consider the IBO a regulatory body. We're not a governing body. We're a sanctioning body. And some sanctioning bodies consider themselves both. They're entitled to do that. But we're not a regulatory body. The difference being that I can take a title away from a fighter, but I can't change the result of a fight. Only a regulatory body, like the New York State Athletic Commission or the California State Athletic Commission. Only a regulatory body, like the California State Athletic Commission, can say, we're ready for fights. Our governor said that we're ready for fights. Our broadcasters are ready. We will allow fights in California again. It's met. Our regulations are now in order. I don't want to be a sanctioning body that says we're going to do fights in some particular jurisdiction because I think it's okay. I can't be the one making that decision. It has to be the government regulatory bodies. So when the health regulatory bodies say it's safe, then our first fights will probably be broadcast fights only, no audiences. And that'll be where we start. And then now you have a question of how many people can you let in? I don't want to tell them how many you can let in. I don't want to be the one to tell them when they should be tested or retested. That's up to a regulatory body, whether it be the health authorities in that state or that country. So we're waiting and watching the same way you guys are to see when when the regulatory bodies tell us we can go forward. That hasn't happened yet. We're getting close. I think there'll be fights. I think Germany is gearing up for fights in sometime late in the summer. I think we'll have some fights. I'm not sure about the ABC, Association of Boxing Commissions, or individual commissions where we're at with that, but it'll depend on what that particular state tells us we can do. That's where we're at with COVID-19.
And so we're assuming you said you're going to have a meeting the next week to 10 days about, how the next phases of proceeding, especially. But have you been in contact with other promoters or anybody, or especially where your champions are? I know you've been talking to your champions and saying everything's kind of on hold. Have they been kind of blowing up your office and saying like, hey, what's going on here? Like, and
yes. And they want to reset the fights. They're asking for they're proposing dates. But then I said, have you checked with your commission, your federation that runs boxing in your country? Yes. And what are they telling you? They said they can't give us assurances of the dates yet. I said, so what good does it do for us to sanction your fight for July or August when your own regulatory bodies haven't given you an okay yet? Mm-hmm. Once they give you the okay, then we'll sanction the fight again. We're telling you now that we haven't taken any titles away. So we're just on hold. It's a timeout, forced timeout. That's what it is.
Right. As we kind of wrap up here, just to kind of go outside of boxing really quick, because of this, since we're touching on this whole COVID-19 thing around the world, you personally and yourself and your loved ones, how are you holding up? How you've been the last couple months since this started?
It's been tough. If you're a social person, which I am, it's very difficult. And it's hard staying home.
Yeah.
And the first couple of months, my wife and I just stayed home. We weren't where we were living. You couldn't. Firstly, you were told to stay home. Mm-hmm. That was in Miami. You couldn't get tested. Mm-hmm. We were in the middle of the epidemic. It was bad in Miami. Mm-hmm. Our numbers were horrific.
Right.
Not quite as bad as New York, but you go out and you see people without masks, and I'm an older person. I'm at risk. So it was it's been very difficult. I'm now in North Carolina, where I am, because it's so remote. They've had, knock on wood, they've had no deaths from COVID-19 in either county that we are in.
Wow.
Not one. And it's not a lot of people up here. The nearest it's town. It's about 45 minutes away, and they've had no deaths either.
Wow.
But now the summertime is starting. So the people are coming up to the mountains to get away from the cities.
Yeah.
And there is social distancing, but when I go into a supermarket with my wife the other day, we were only the few people were wearing masks, myself and my wife. They're walking around like there's nothing wrong. So, like I'm ready to apologize. I'm sorry, I'm not going up the store. I really just have a mask on. It's been a tough time for all of us.
Right.
Can I just say a few things that I was
Absolutely. Absolutely.
During this time, I thought about, we have this racial thing going on, this horrific time in our country's life. In boxing, I've noticed all throughout the years two wonderful things about the sport that I don't think we talk about enough. I've never seen any kind of racism in boxing. I just don't see it. And I don't see problems between countries either. This like boxers and boxing community are a close community in a lot of ways, because it's not a large community. So you get to know everybody in boxing. And you find yourself becoming friends with people from countries that you never thought you'd meet people from those countries.
Yeah.
Let alone become established. I have friends all over the world now that I communicate with, that I'm not doing business with, but I met them through boxing. And I've never seen any kind of racism in boxing. Black, white, Oriental, anything. I just haven't seen it. So it's one of the good things about boxing that we can talk about. So I wanted to praise our sport in that regard, which it's one of the areas that we can be proud of. And the only other thing I'd like to say is next time you hear the IBO is not recognized, maybe you can insert some other word instead of recognized, like, but it is respected or is independent and is reliable. Maybe substitute another R word for instead of recognized, maybe respected or independent, because we try to do a good job. Mm-hmm. You guys are growing like crazy. Be proud of what you're doing. That's what my assistant told me, Mr. Levine, these guys are really on a trajectory that's straight up. I want to talk to them then. That's what you told me. So good luck in your endeavors in the boxing game, and thank you for giving me the time.
We appreciate it, Ed, and good luck to you. As we mentioned, we wanted to get you on for a while. We had a lot of our listeners and people who listen to our show who have asked us, because the other presidents of the sanctioning bodies, at least some of them, they'll give interviews and stuff, but a lot of people have always been intrigued by you just because you're there as well, but nobody, the attention is obviously a little bit less. So people wanted to hear from you. And obviously, like as I mentioned, our listeners have always been asking us, try to get the president of the IBO, try to get the president of the IBO. So luckily, your assistant kind of praised us like that, and it was able to coordinate it because we appreciate it.
She's young like you guys. So, so sometimes the elders have to listen to the youth.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes. And so not the whole time. Well, Ed,
thanks,
you're welcome. We appreciate it. And then, you're welcome. You're welcome back anytime, especially when all this starts kind of going back into the fold with boxing. Anytime you want to come back on to maybe deliver some news to the boxing public or anything, just reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to get you back on.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Man, I'm glad we were able to, as we wrap up here, Mike, me and you, I'm glad we were able to get him to get on his computer. Cause if you notice the last 40 odd minutes that we had him on his computer was pretty good. So I'm glad, because the whole time we were having connection issues, I was like, oh no, I was like, all these answers that we're hearing for him, we can't hear them. And, it's stuff that boxing fans want to know, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. He's got a prominent position and he's been in and around the boxing business for a long, long time. So somebody I would like to sit down and, listen to.
Yeah, maybe have a beer with. Hopefully he drinks. But yeah, I think it's interesting how he, like you said, how the IBO does have computerized rankings and you can't really manipulate them in a sense. Like, I don't want to go out on a limb and accuse anybody, but, it is what it is. But I think that I think, especially after talking to him now, I think it's we're really trying to. I think he's really trying to be as impartial as he can, because it's obviously difficult with all these sanctioning bodies having so many world championship sanctioning bodies in the sport of boxing. It's hard to be 100% objective all the time. Like there's times where you're going to have to make a decision that is subjective and you're going to get scrutiny. But I think the most we can ask for as, hardcore boxing fans is that we'll at least make an attempt, to try to make it as objective as you can. And I think like you mentioned how you asked him, the computerized rankings thing is very, is a big step, in that whole situation, right?
Yeah, I think, he's just, it's gone for integrity over, kind of selling the belts to the highest bidder, which is, it's nice to see. It's maybe kind of affected them and pushed them down to the fifth recognized body. But
right.
He took that moral stand.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to talk to him. And if there's anybody else who's listening to this episode at the moment or watching the broadcast of this show on this episode on YouTube, and you're from one of the sanctioning bodies, maybe you're an employee, maybe you're one of the presidents, WBC, WBO, WBA, IBF. We want you on here too. We want to give everybody a platform to speak. You're more than welcome to jump on, reach out to us through email, through social media, whatever. You can come on here too, and kind of speak about your procedures and everything like that. We're just trying to get your information and your opinions to the boxing fans and the boxing listeners, the boxing sphere, if you will. But Mike, as we wrap up here, go ahead and once again, like I tell you every single week, go ahead and tell the fans and our listeners where they can find us.
It's at The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And next week, for the first time since March, we're going to actually have some fights to talk about. Some fights that have actually happened. Man,
right? I'm excited. So hopefully everything goes according to plan and we keep it going. Even if it's without fans, at least we get something. But, once again, special thanks to Ed Levine, president and head of the IBO. Welcome back anytime. We appreciate it. Big thanks to him and his team and his assistant. His assistant's the ones who hyped us up. So thank you to her. So she's awesome.
I better send her some Venmo.
I know, huh? Don't tell people that we paid her off. No, I'm just kidding. But once again, I'm Danny Z for my co-host Michael Shepard. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.